So this is the besotted pride of West London Minipod, and we're coming to you just before the start of the season. The transfer window has been fairly quiet for Brentford, but Brentford fans have been very happy because we've signed a little bit of a superstar from what we can understand. Fabio Carvahlo used to play for Fulham, then played for Liverpool, and now he's a B. Signed on the dotted line for Brentford a few days ago. To be quite honest with you, we know a little bit about Carvalho, but we thought we needed a little bit more information. So we've gone over to the Anfield Wrap to speak to Neil from the Anfield Wrap, who knows loads about Carvalho. Neil, how are you?
I'm very well indeed. I watched him play 3 times this summer, so it doesn't get more knowledgeable. 3 times in person, I hasten to add. So it's quite something. I would argue that could well be 3 times more than I'd seen him play for at least 12 months. But 3 times I saw him this summer playing in pre-season for Liverpool.
That's good. So I'm looking forward to getting all that information. So is all the Brentford fans out there as well. So just listen, Carvalho. So the first thing that I know about him, I remember that he was playing for Fulham in the Championship. You know, he came through their youth system as well, signed, senior terms for them. He'd been with them for quite a while, and he became a little bit of a poster boy for the Fulham fans. He's really excited about him, smashing up the Championship, as they said. I think he scored 11 goals in 40 games for Fulham. He's an attacking midfielder. And then he signed for you for 5 million 2 years ago. Now, I remember there was rumours about him signing the previous January. It didn't quite happen. Then he signed in the summer and he signed 5 million. And there was all sorts of tears down in Putney. The Fulham fans were really unhappy because they just thought you're just stealing one of our best players. Just tell me about that.
Yeah, the Fulham fans were right. Ultimately, Liverpool saw that this lad was obviously very, very talented. And the reason why the fee was as low as it was for Liverpool then was because there was a contract tribunal situation. So he was out of contract, but because he was a younger player, it went to tribunal. And I think there was a suspicion amongst the Fulham crew that Liverpool were in part buying him to flip him, that there was never that sort of idea of Liverpool being fully committed to him. And I think there's a couple of circumstances around this. You know, Liverpool have a really bad year, 2022, 2023. That season really goes badly for Liverpool. And as we all know from supporting teams, it's not a good environment for a young player to walk into when things aren't going well. I think it's easier for young players to get time on the pitch and opportunities when sides are blossoming, ironically. But when things aren't going well, managers will tend to go to what they know, tend to go to what they can back. And also, some managers will also want to protect younger players as well and not throw them into a particularly difficult environment. But it's also worth saying that if you do throw a young player in and he gets 2 or 3 opportunities to shine and doesn't take them, which is maybe what happens to Carvalho as well in the first half of that season, then it's easy for that player to end up being bombed out and a little bit of a scapegoat. And I think that happens to him as well. So, yeah, the Fulham supporters' instincts, I think, were broadly right. It was probably the wrong move for Carvalho at that point in his career, going all the way to Liverpool. And certainly the way the year went, it would suggest that was the case.
And I mean, me looking about this and talking about it from a Brentford fan's point of view, because obviously this is making me smile, the fact that the Fulham fans have got all sorts of tears running down their eyes. But it's kind of worked out in our favour because Fulham would never have sold us Carvalho. We would have never got him for £5 million. We would have been, we're Brentford and we're not being disrespectful to us as a team, but we're well down the pecking order. So, I mean, I'm sure he'd be a player that we would have loved to have bought at that time, whether or not he was, who would have fitted in, because obviously we would have to juggle a few players around. So ironically, 2 years later, he's kind of fallen off the shelf a little bit. His value as far as kind of other teams are concerned is not as high as it was, which allowed Brentford to come in, probably promise him a lot of very, very, things that are important to him. Game time, being a key player in the team, all this kind of stuff. And for him, he's just thinking, mate, I'm going to go for this move. And it's probably happened for us at the right time. Do you think?
Yeah, I think it has happened for you at the right time. It's worth saying he does very, very well on loan at Hull last season. So he doesn't do very well when he goes to Leipzig, but he excels at Hull. So he's not that far away from effectively scoring every other game at Hull. I think he gets 20 appearances for them and scores 9 goals. Gets a couple of assists with that as well. In our pre-season, just then, he scores 3 across the course of the 3 games, which I think, again, is for me, what he is he is an attacking midfielder, and he's got obviously good touch and good technique.
And tell me, just sorry, pre-season, because I know you went over to America for pre-season.
Yeah,
who did you play and where did you go to?
Real Betis, Arsenal, and Manchester United. Real Betis, Arsenal, and Manchester United. And over there in the States, he was pretty close to Liverpool's standout player. Jota, I think, ultimately takes that crown along with Gerald Quansah. But then Carvalho, was very, very good. It's just difficult to envisage precisely where he plays for us. I don't think Slot not dissimilar to Klopp, has got an interest in playing him as a sort of a number 10-ish style player. I don't think I don't think that at no point does he get that opportunity. He played him off the left slot in pre-season, but he scores goals. And I think the thing he is more than anything, if you ask me what his sort of outstanding attribute is from all the time I've seen him at Liverpool, I think he's a finisher. I think he's someone who sticks the ball in the back of the net. I think it's something. He's calm around goal, in front of goal. He's got a massive injury time winner for us against Newcastle at the start of the 2022-2023 season. When he came off the bench, he scored away at Manchester City to make the game 1-1. I think I'm right in saying. In the same season, in the League Cup, granted, but it was still a game against Manchester City, and it was a lovely finish drilled into the corner. He doesn't, for us, whenever I've seen him, I always feel as though he's not impacting games enough. And I think he needs a fair bit of coaching, but get him around the penalty area and give him opportunities. And I think I think he's about as good as you could hope for in front of goal. And that's why I think it's a really interesting signing for this Brentford side. I can see exactly how Frank will be thinking first and foremost, if he's a coachable player and Frank's a really good coach, that he can really get something out of him. But I think the second part of this is that what's one of the hardest things to coach in football is finishing it, is keeping your nerve around the opposition penalty area. It is that sort of that coolness under pressure, and that's definitely what he has. And I think that could be a real asset. And I'm not surprised when you look at the goal return at Hull, the goal return at Fulham. For attacking midfielders to be approaching 1 and 2 is, I think, quite marked at any level of the game. And there he is. That's what he's been doing.
So interesting. I mean, you talked about him being a finisher. You talked about him slotting into the team. You talked about him being, potentially a number 10, but couldn't quite be a number 10 at Liverpool. The Brentford team very well. Our players, and for me, I'm sort of thinking, where does Carvalho fit into our side? Thomas Frank likes to play 4-3-3 if he can do, unless he's playing against certain sides like Liverpool, Man United, Man City, where he goes, 3-5-2. But basically goes to that scenario. But where do you see Carvalho fitting into the Brentford team?
I think if he's going to play 4-3-3, then I think he probably comes in off the left much of the time and sort of makes it narrow there. I think the question for me is, when you say about him playing 3-5-2 in some games or 3-4-3, is whether or not there might be a move where he can sort of carry him in a bit of a floating midfield position and see what he can get from that. I think that could be something which he could use, so it almost becomes 3-4-1-2. Rather than the idea of 3-4-3 or 3-5-2. I think that could be a really nice use of Carvalho in there. In a 4-3-3, I think you do play him off the left, and I think the idea of there being a central striker, and I know we're not clear on who that is this season for Brentford, given Tony's contract situation and the very unfortunate injury to Thiago Igor, or is it Igor Thiago? I can never remember which way round it is. But whichever way it is, the injury just really deeply unfortunate. I think, though, whatever way that goes, maybe then it's in Bueno through the middle. But I think the idea of him buzzing around, being a central-ish wide player, if you see what I mean, one who plays doesn't hook the touchline, but plays between the centre back and the full back, in terms of where he's looking to find space and therefore is close to the goal. I think that could work really, really quite nicely, and it genuinely wouldn't surprise me if he hits double figures.
And there's also rumours. What happens is when a player leaves the side, the Fulham fans there, they're just distraught and they're just saying, he's dead to me, and he's got an attitude and everything like that. The Liverpool fans, though, interestingly, there's been sort of kind of two sort of trains of thought from what I've seen from the Liverpool fans. Some of them are saying we're really gutted. We thought he looks like a brilliant player. We thought this is going to be his season, and we're going to take him to that next level. And some of them are saying, actually, to be quite honest with you, he hasn't really cut the mustard. It's probably good that we let him go. We've got a good profit on him. We bought him for 5 million. We're going to sell him for 20 million. And also, we've heard he's got a little bit of an attitude. Now, what is your view?
I think it's a good move all round. So I think you get those transfers sometimes where I think everyone's satisfied. I think Liverpool will like the sum of money because ultimately he was going to be sixth choice, and I'm still hopeful that Liverpool might recruit one more attacker, but he was going to be sixth choice at best, and it's a good sum of money for that. So I think that's no bad thing from a Liverpool point of view. I think Brentford have got a really good player who is more than capable, as I say, of contributing in the most direct way imaginable, which is sticking it in the back of the net. And then I think the next phase of that, I think the footballer needs to go somewhere and have the idea that he's committed to a club for at least 2 or 3 years, that's his home, and he's got to make it work. The attitude point's interesting because I think he struggled a little bit when he went to Leipzig, but I'm always a little bit sympathetic also when players come over here, don't get me wrong, it's not almost a xenophobic point of view. I'm a little bit sympathetic when players go abroad, and I always feel it's not a surprise to me when loans don't work. I think the idea of going abroad, but knowing you're getting effectively, this, you might only be 12 months of this. It's not the sort of thing that makes you want to uproot your whole life and existence and priorities and all of that. I worry a little bit what we're doing with so many loans to young players. I think there's a point at which it sort of, if breaks them's the wrong way to frame it, but I think certain players need to feel part of something. So, the one thing that did not come up as any way, shape or form as an issue was his relationship with Arne Slot this summer. Slot appeared to find him very coachable. I know people who were at the open training session that they did in the United States. I wasn't, but Slot did a lot of personal work with Carvalho during that. And I would have thought that the new manager wouldn't waste his time if he thought that the footballer in question was a time waster. If you see what I mean, he's got enough to do, Arne Slot, but he was very focused on what Carvalho was doing during that session in a really positive and upbeat way. I worry when we say footballers have got bad attitudes a lot of the time. I think that's at the very least that's always a two-way street. So I'm a bit of a middle ground, really. I think he does have something to prove when he goes to Brentford. I think he does have to make Brentford his home. I think he does have to work very well with Thomas Frank and work very well with his teammates. But I also think, well, this is his job now. If it goes brilliantly at Brentford, it's not the most important move of his life. That might be the one that comes after Brentford if it goes absolutely brilliantly. But as it stands right now, this is actually the most important move of his life. Liverpool, you can afford to, if it doesn't go well for you at Liverpool, you'll always get a good club if you're a decent player, and that's what's happened here. But now's the time when he's got to prove it. He's got to prove what he is as a footballer. And I know you all highly rate Thomas Frank as a coach. I highly rate Thomas Frank as a coach and as a person. And I expect to see him, within reason, I expect to see him do pretty well. I think that there's always context for a club like Brentford. You and I talked a lot last season about the impact of just 2 or 3 significant injuries on that Brentford side. And if that's the case, then it might be hard for him to show, not the idea that he's injured, but that the team finds it a little bit difficult to get going. But I think if Brentford have a good season, I'm genuinely of the view by the end of that season, you'll be saying Carvalho has a good season too. If there's a question mark about him as a player, I would say he's not the one who, when it's not going that well, is part of what digs you out. I think if it's going well, I think he'll do well. And I think that'd be my biggest sort of possible criticism. But then let's be clear about this. I'm also saying this about a lad who's, he's 22.
Yeah. And I was just going to come to that as well, because obviously, you talked a lot about him, quite gushingly about him and his style. I mean, if you just were to just give us a few words on the positives of Carvalho, what would they be? Strong
movement, really strong instincts, and very, very calm in front of goal. That's what he is.
Okay, cool. And if you were to say his probably points that he can improve on.
Yeah, a little bit lightweight, a little bit anonymous from time to time. He's not the biggest, and that's why I think it's a really interesting sign of this Brentford side, where so many of these players are quite physically impressive, the Brentford crew. So he's not the biggest, he's a little bit lightweight, and I also think he's one where he's got to work out how to assert his personality onto games.
Okay, and finally, we're talking about, Brentford, their season starting at the weekend against Crystal Palace. It's going to be on the TV as well. But, of course, we'll be there behind the goal, as we always are, which is all good. And like I said, we're checking it out. Obviously, we've been in the pub from 9 o'clock in the morning, but that's a separate story altogether. But then coming on to that, he's going to be doing his first away game of the season, which is your first home game of the season. It's going to be a homecoming for Carvalho. Are you slightly nervous about him coming back and maybe doing a bit of an embarrassment thing on Liverpool?
Yes, but that's because I'm a football fan. But that's what we all think, and it's what scares the life out of us all the time. But yes, I am a little worried about that. That on the telly, 4:30 on the Sunday, it's exactly the sort of game Carvalho scores in anyway. It wouldn't surprise me if at the end of the season you're not saying things like, I tell you what, he scored 2 or 3 there against the top 6. That's the sort of player that he is. I mentioned before about his goal against Manchester City. He scored against Arsenal and Manchester United in our pre-season. So yes, it would not surprise me if Carvalho does indeed rock up to Anfield and find a way to stick one in the back of the net.
Okay, so listen, Neil, it's really great chatting to you, and I look forward to see you next week when we come up to Anfield as well, up there for the bank holiday weekend. Very much looking forward to it, and also very much looking forward to your ex-player, Carvalho, sticking a few goals against Crystal Palace and then sticking a few more against you in Liverpool in a few weeks' time.
I mean, if he does score against us, I really want him to celebrate. I think players should always celebrate against their former clubs. There's nothing better than beating your mates at things. So I always hate the sort of when he's showing respect. Don't show respect. Get your top off in front of the cop.
That's right. So when he celebrates, he can pull up his shirt and say, "This is for you, Neil." Right?
If he wants to, he's welcome to do so.
Okay, nice one. So that was Besotted Pride of West London mini pod. You'll catch up with all our podcasts on prideofwest.london. We'll also be doing our preview for the Crystal Palace game on prideofwest.london. Check us out. Good to be back.